Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. And for those of you who are not Muslim, my greetings and welcome, because I think the kind of talk that I give, it doesn't really matter what religion you are. I really give a science talk. Even though I've been a Muslim for many years, I've remained being an objective scientist, so my talk will be purely a scientific talk that does touch on the realm of God. And one thing I wanted to do before I started, from what I understand, if I understand correctly, I hope I'm not wrong on this, that you are among the sort of the elite or those in Malaysia who have done the best in school, and the government is sending you overseas and paying for your education, hopefully expecting that you will use your excellent brains to bring knowledge back to Malaysia and help the country progress. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity. And I hope one of the things I want to do tonight, besides tell you a little bit about relativity theory and God, I also want to, I hope, give you some motivation and enthusiasm for how wonderful and exciting science is. I've been reading in the paper recently that students studying the pure sciences like physics and chemistry and electronics and things like that, there's a decrease in numbers because that's not where the interest is today. But those sciences are just absolutely amazing. I mean, I personally would still be an atheist if it wasn't for physics. So instead of physics taking me away from God and science taking me away from God, to my great surprise, and I wasn't looking for God at all, believe me, what I came to know in physics told me that I had to accept, if I wanted to be a fair and honest scientist, I had to accept that God existed. What I'll be talking to you about tonight, which is a scientific proof of the existence of God based on Einstein's special theory of relativity, I didn't know that back then, but there were other proofs that are really quite strong from modern physics. And I don't know when there's supposed to be 2 talks in this series, Modern Science Finds God, the first one being about a scientific proof of the existence of God, and the second one also, I think, being an extremely interesting one, where I'm not sure if I get to do it or if it's going to be preferred to have somebody do it who speaks Bahasa Melayu. But it is about it's a story of the creation of the universe. It is consistent with everything we know from physics and cosmology and genetics and biology, and even includes all the information that the evolutionists use, but it puts God in the middle of the whole process and explains a mechanism by which God almost surely does manipulate his physical existence from the light at the beginning of the universe that has been somewhat erroneously described as the Big Bang, because there was no actual explosion, all the way up to the creation of the human being. So I think that will be very interesting also. And part of what I want to talk to you about tonight is a little bit about the philosophy of science, because I hope you realize that science has greatly changed the world. As the sister who introduced me mentioned, science has for a very long time been the enemy of religious belief and the belief in the existence of God. Actually, it wasn't always that way. For thousands of years in human history, it wasn't really called science then, but what was practiced as science then was actually done particularly to find out the nature of God and what our relationship with God was. That was the purpose of science. And that remained the purpose of science until probably the time of Sir Isaac Newton. I don't remember the exact date, 400 or 500 years ago, when Sir Isaac Newton essentially put formulas on most of the aspects of life that we saw that would be called physics today. And it was the beginning of essentially secular materialism. Secular meaning world without God. Materialism meaning that the world is a place of little bits of stuff that is moved around by fixed laws that exist only within that universe. In other words, it doesn't require God to do all the things that happen. And philosophers, so it was actually science that first took away the spirituality that the world had had for thousands of years. And that wasn't really the intention of the scientists, but once the scientists came up with the theories, the philosophers used these theories and came up with, for example, the French philosopher Rousseau, shortly after Newton's findings in the French court, where the philosophers tended to not make a lot of money. I mean, you know, they say philosophy doesn't bake any bread. There's no real product there. So it's hard today probably for philosophers to get jobs. In the past it was much harder. So the philosophers had to be somewhat entertainers also. And Rousseau, the famous French philosopher, was an entertaining philosopher in the French court with the French king and the nobles. And he once said something like, he said, based on the findings of modern physics, specifically those of Sir Isaac Newton, that if somebody today could tell me where every bit of matter was in the universe and what direction that bit of matter was going and how fast it was going, I could predict the total future of the world and the whole universe. Then he said, and so therefore, why do we need God? That would be true. If he could predict the whole future of the universe, God wouldn't be needed. And it appeared to people, based on Newton's theories, that it was possible to do that. And so that was really the end of a spiritual world and the beginning of a non-spiritual world based on the philosophies and the science and philosophies, and then later the culture of secular materialism. Now, interestingly, it was, I think just a few days ago, a week or so ago, was the 100th anniversary of Einstein's first discovery of one of his theories of relativity, probably the general theory of relativity. I'm not sure which one he found first. I can't remember at the moment. But, you know, I mean, this is a real milestone in history. Probably Einstein stands out. Einstein, among physicists, is not considered to be the greatest physicist ever. Among others, Richard Feynman would be considered a much greater physicist among physicists than Einstein. But as for Einstein's findings of his special and general theory of relativity, they are probably the single most significant advance in science, giant leap in science that has ever occurred in human history. So it is a really magnificent feat that he was able to accomplish, because he understood the world in a way totally different than the world was understood before. And one of the important things about Einstein's theories of relativity, by the way, I don't know how many of you know this, but Einstein never intended to call particularly his special theory of relativity, he never called it his theory of relativity. Because philosophers have said that Einstein's theories of relativity proved everything is relative, and so there are no absolutes, which of course we don't believe, or the Muslims don't believe. And Einstein himself, though, didn't call his theory the theory of relativity. He called his special theory the absolutism theory, because he said he found the one thing in a relative universe that was absolute, and that was light, and the special nature and special qualities of light. And tonight we'll be talking about those special qualities of light, which are absolutely amazing. When I was graduating high school, which is 40 some years ago, I think 40 or I forgot how long ago it was. It was a long time. But I do remember when I was graduating in the newspaper reading that now 50 years after Einstein's discovery of, I think, the special theory of relativity, they said, oh, it's still, his theories